right. Hello, folks. Welcome back to the next session of our Let's Build. So, before I get started, uh, today's session is going to be, again, if I'm looking up here, it's because I'm looking at the chat. That's where, like, my OBS stuff is. Today is going to be about blueprinting. So, blueprinting is a pretty busy subject. I'm not going to say complex because sometimes it can be pretty simple, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot of working parts. There's a lot of little gears and cogs that kind of need to be in place for this stuff to work. And if you recall, last stream at the very end, the acro was actually crashing the kit, the one that we made in the Let's Build. It seems to have something to do with the skeleton, which, if you also recall, I was having some kind of strange import issues. So what we're going to actually do for the stream today is I'm going to demonstrate the blueprinting stuff with the acro I'm actually using for the mod, the ARK Edition's acro. Because he has a pretty set up blueprint for the most part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk through his blueprint. I'm going to talk about what some settings do, what needs to be changed, what could be ignored, and just kind of show like what parts are doing what and why you would need it for that system. Because actually creating it for the most part, it's kind of already set up as templates for you. So for me, what I think would be the helpful information is knowing what actually needs to be changed or what should be changed by the mod author. So with that being said, I'm going to try to fit as much as I can in today's stream. And if I can't fit everything, or if maybe there's things that you all don't fully understand yet or want to know more about, I can fit that into the third session, because the third session probably won't take up most of the time because it's kind of just uploading and figuring out any issues with the blueprinting, which would come from today's stream. So let's get started. So the thing that we did last time, if I go to the little Let's Build folder, we got all of our mod assets set up, and we got an animation blueprint. Excuse me. We got our animation blueprint for our character. We got our mesh in, skeleton, textures, all the visual bits. So if I throw just this little acro in, you see we have the nice model, and some animations work for it too. So I can actually throw an animation on this guy and kind of just watch it work. And if I hit play to load Pi, which will take a second because it's going to load a bunch of stuff, we'll see we have most of the visual bits working for the creature. So at this point, you know, there is no actual creature. Like if we went and played ARK, there wouldn't be any character spawning, there wouldn't be any acro to threaten your survivor's life, so on and so forth. So that's what we want to do today, is we want to set up the actual the NPC. Basically we want to set up the computer controller of the acro, and it's basically one big blueprint that is called the character blueprint, and that's every single ARK creature, even survivors, use a blueprint like this as kind of the base NPC layout. And then this blueprint references a bunch of other different ones. In Acro's case, let's say Dino settings, which controls the food it likes to eat in game. We have the AI controller, which is the actual how it processes navigating the environment, how far away threat should be before it becomes aggressive. What else do we have? We have the inventory component, which controls like its loot drops when it dies, things like that. There's a lot, and I'll go through it as briefly as I can. Still just waiting for Pi to load, buffer everything, which it looks like it's about to drop us in, because I don't see any more dialogues. Yeah, there we go. So we have our acro. It looks like desktop audio is muted as well. There you go. Now you can hear my guy swing. So, got our animations and stuff in. And now we want to actually start setting up this character so it can walk around. So, by the end of today, ideally, we would have something that is close to this. So we have a character, he's got his random colorized regions, he walks around. When he sees me, he's going to become upset. So that's the goal for today. So I'm going to remove that from Pi. And I have it organized a little strangely, so I'm just going to go through the character first. So again, the character blueprint is the NPC, right? So if I wanted to make one of these, I can right click, go to blueprint class, and then you're going to see a big list of stuff. So it might be a little imposing at first, but what you want in this case is the character, which you can see here under common. We have, you know, we have character right there. Character is a type of pawn that includes the ability to walk around. You could do that if you want like a basic character, right? But it may not be. In this case, in ARK's case, we have Dino characters and we have human characters. There's different ones, right? So I don't know if that's which one that's basing it off of, but what you can do is you can just type in character here, and we're going to see character status component, which is actually another important thing we'll have to talk about. And I can just minimize these, minimize. Here we go. So we have pawn, character, primal character, and then primal dino character. So every single creature in the game, whether it's a dinosaur, it's a mammoth, it's a enforcer, are using primal dino character. And then I believe the child class for a lot of those is Dino Character BP. So you see if I minimize these, I see a few different ones. I see VR Main Boss, I see Primal Bot Character, Dino Character, so on. So you see if I minimize those little drop downs, I'm seeing like Akatina, Amarga, Andrewsarchus, and Kylo. So most dinos are under the Dino Character BP. So all we would want to do in that case is just select Dino Character BP and hit select. And it's going to make a blueprint class that is going to be childed off of that. So most settings, like if you'd want to maybe leave them vanilla and not really change them, you'd probably want to use Dino BP if you're making a creature, because most of the settings are going to be set up in a way so that it's already kind of ready to go for the most part, and you have to do a few small tweaks. Another thing that I think is important to note here, I'm going to just delete that because, again, I already have the character there, is naming conventions for character BP. Truth be told, I don't know if there's anything like super enforced with naming conventions, but if you want to follow how Wildcard and ARK does it, you want to have the name of the creature. So in my case, I have Acrocanthosaurus. I also have that followed by AA for ARK Editions or Editions Ascended, just in case there was another mod that wanted to use Acro, so there is an overlap, right? Because think of it as file names. You know, if you have two files with the same exact name, your computer doesn't really know where to pull from, right? So you want to have a little separation. And then we have underscore character, which is the class of blueprint, underscore BP, which is just short for blueprint. And then that's it. And if you were to spawn this in game, you know, a lot of you folks might be used to the character underscore BP underscore C, which the C just stands for, actually, I don't know if it stands for character. Maybe it's component. I'm not too sure. But C is not something you need to include in the file name. That's just something you have to do for the actual console controls. So that is our naming convention. And I'm going to open this blueprint. You're probably going to see a huge graph immediately because that's the last thing I was working on. Just give it a moment just to open. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so not a terrible graph. And so I'm going to just scooch that for now because this is the thing we want to kind of be looking at right now. I guess I'll just leave that. So UE5 lays out a little differently now. So when you open a character blueprint, typically what you'll probably see as far as the UI layout is on the left side we have all the different components for our character, which if I go to the viewport tab here I can see the actual character. And the bottom left here we have a bunch of variables and functions for different graphing and character stuff. So don't be intimidated. This is like an almost complete character, so there is just a lot of stuff over here. Normally this stuff is blank, right? This is up to you to set this stuff up. We have a viewport here, which is where we'll see all of our graphs and different functions and things. And then on the right side is the actual blueprint, which is where we can kind of just type in the different settings and change those. So I'm gonna kind of just walk through this. I'm gonna say before I do this, there's a lot of settings here. And for me, I'm very used to this stuff. So there may be something I skim over that it's very second nature to me that maybe you all don't understand. So I ask, please, everyone bear with me here. And if anyone has any questions about anything, even if it's like, why does Acro have 3 toes? Like something simple like that, please, type in a comment, ask me if I could explain this a little more or like kind of just talk about this more, right? Because this is for you all to learn. So, without further ado, the character blueprint. So at the very top, and you'll see we have a lot of different like tabs here. We can minimize, close. By default, this is probably just how it's going to look when you open a Dino character BP. At the very top, we have things like location, rotation, scale, so on. This is for the mesh and the capsule component. So if I go over to the viewport, you'll see we have our Dino mesh, which on the left side you see when I click that, it highlights it. That's the mesh. And then we have this sort of capsule here. And this is what's called the capsule component. Every creature in the game has this. Truth be told, I may not fully understand how it works, but from what I understand, it's basically the actual character if you were to imagine it without the mesh, right? Like this is the actual thing that the NPC is moving. This is where velocity and stuff is imparted. This is where like aggro radius is determined, is this one thing. So if aggro did not have a mesh, you would treat this thing as the aggro. This is kind of just the hidden component that is the vehicle for the character. This capsule component determines a lot of different things. It determines how the camera is zoomed out with the character, different motions with the camera. It determines things like step height, how much of a landscape or terrain it's able to step over, its distance to certain targets, a lot of different things like that. If we look on the right side here when I select it, there's a lot of stuff here, but there's actually only 2 things that I'm changing in this case, and that is the half height and the capsule radius. And you can tell that this is not using default settings because on the right side here I have these little arrows. And what those do is if I click those, it's going to revert it to the default setting that it would have been. And generally how you want to set up a capsule is you want the radius to generally be where the feet will line up as far as like IK and stuff. So like if he started walking, the feet aren't going to go too much further than this capsule. Same with them going back. And the height in this case would be the height of the character. Now it's important to note is this is capsule half height, right? It's not the full, we don't want it going all the way up to his back. We want it kind of in the middle, like the center of mass, right? So imagining that the mesh isn't here, the top of the capsule is probably about there, which is kind of the center line for the character, right? Will you go into custom attacks, music, or in the Dino status effects applied to the players if you're near the Dire? Yeah, I'll talk about attacks. Music, maybe not so much. And status effects, buffs, and things. Yeah, I'll talk about that as well. So that's the capsule component. Kind of has that set up. We got our mesh, which is using just kind of the mesh settings that we set up in the first session. Ooh, my mouse just went crazy. There we go. What else is there? I can delete this. I'm not going to be using that. Dino footprint. I'll save that for if we end up doing more sessions, because that's, I think, a little more advanced. When source components, I'll leave that out as well, unless I have time at the end. So what I want to do is I want to just go back up here and click class defaults, and that's going to take me back to just the basic overarching acro. I compile quick. So beyond that, we have a little animation tab here, which this is only really controlling the animation blueprint. So we have startled animation, use BP allow play montage, which we can ignore that. We have the death animation. So if you didn't want it to do the default ragdoll, if you wanted a very specific, like it has a little flail collapse thing, that's where you would put that animation. Animation mode, we have use animation blueprints, default. Anim class, we have acro anim BP. That's where we would plug that animation blueprint that we made in the first video. And then we can leave most of these settings default. Down at mesh, we have skeletal mesh asset. That's going to be the actual mesh that we established in the first session. It's the one that the anim blueprint is referencing. And then we can kind of keep scrolling. So this tab here where it says default, these are actually all settings specifically for acro. So when I mentioned earlier, like this is where all the variables and the functions are, that's kind of being determined over here. So I'm not going to mess with any of those because that might break my character. But when you are doing the graphing part of the character blueprint, a lot of settings will show up in your character BP here. So I'm going to scroll past that. And now we're going to get to what I believe is the standard Dino character BP stuff. So right here under our tab, Acro AA character, this is where we're going to see a whole lot of entries. And honestly, I'm probably going to skip 70% of it because a lot of it, unless it's a very specific circumstance for a creature you're making, is more advanced, and it's not something that we want to get into for an introductory video into character blueprinting, right? It's just too much, and it would take me all day to talk about each setting here piece by piece. So we don't have time for that. So again, as I mentioned earlier, if you see a setting that has this little arrow, that means it's changed from the default Dino character BP. In this case, it's just a lot of different like settings that may be specific to acro, which in this case, let's say we come to the first one here, prevent character basing. Trying to remember what character basing actually is. I think it has something to do with characters standing on the character. I could be wrong. I'm trying to remember. It has something to do with like either you being able to stand on the character or this character being able to stand on platforms. It might be that. But we're just going to keep scrolling. We have a lot of settings here. We're going to pass through initial replication, prevent unduplicated server. It's a lot of stuff we don't really need to mess with, right? Keep going. Custom tag. So the tag, which I believe there's two different settings for it in a character blueprint. There's custom tag and there's Dino name tag. I believe Dino name tag is the one that's predominantly used. But if you've ever done like any configs and you're trying to add something to a spawn container, the tag is typically what you want in this case. So right here, I just have acro, which is short for Acrocanthosaurus. And that's his tag, nice and simple. And we're going to keep scrolling, a bunch of mesh settings. And again, I promise you guys, most of the stuff I'm scrolling past is not going to affect you in the long term. Like you can leave that stuff at default. Let's see, getting down to the actual pawn. So in this case, the pawn would be actual NPC specific settings. So with the character blueprint, there's a lot of different stuff going on. The pawn is the actual NPC that you see walking around and like some settings that are determined by that character specifically. So in this case, we have things like running speed modifier. Should be self-explanatory. It's just later on in this character blueprint, we set the movement speed. I believe it's by centimeters per second. It's either that or meters. It's something. It says it later. But all the running speed modifier is it's that multiplied by this here. So if Acro's movement speed is, let's say 600, so what the running speed modifier will do is multiply the 600 by 2.5 in this case. And that happens when you hold shift, when you start running. That's what that is. Death sound should be self-explanatory. It's the sound that plays when the character is considered dead. And it's just a cue that's put in here. I can talk about cues later in a little bit. We have footstep sounds, physical mat. This is when a footstep event is triggered. It determines what sound it should play. So in this case, we have index 3 here and we have water. Index 0 is just the standard Acro's movement, the footfall sounds, which I can talk about like the anim notifies and stuff too towards the end of the stream. Grab weight threshold. Acro can't grab stuff. I think that's if he was going to grab stuff, it's probably for dragging. Like if you're dragging a corpse, this is probably the weight limit that he can drag. Drag weight is a big determining factor for a lot of things, like what stuff can go into boss arenas and what stuff can't. Acro's using 550, which I think is the cap for going into boss arenas. It's the same weight as Rex. Descriptive name, we have Acrocanthosaurus. When you're looking at the character in the wild and you see like wild so-and-so, that's the name that you'll see here. So it'll be Acrocanthosaurus in this case. So if I typed in wild, stinky, large, two-legged thing, then that's the full name that you'll see when you see one in the wild. That is what the descriptive name is. It is different from the tag. Scrolling down, we have max drag movement speed. I don't know what that is. I think that might be if the Acro is dead and you're dragging its corpse, how fast the corpse can actually be moving. Like it can't exceed a certain speed. I'm going to assume that's what that is. And then scrolling down, we see AI controller class, which is the Acro AI controller BP. And I will talk about that at a later time. I will actually pull it up so I don't forget about it. And another tab, and then I will come back to this. Component tick, we don't need to worry about. Dino uses gang, so things like Allo maybe or Horde Dino, don't need to worry about that stuff. We can leave it. Damage, bone damage adjusters. If you wanted to have things like maybe Acro takes headshot damage, you can set that up here. So I can just add an element to this array. It's going to ask for the bone name and the damage multiplier. So if I wanted Acro to take more damage to the head, I would select the bone that is controlling like the head physics capsule, and I would just enter that name here, and I would say like ×3, and that means if you were to hit it in the head, it's going to take 3 times damage to the head. We're going to ignore that. Physics, we're going to leave it default, mesh, so on and so forth. Death animations, that's something I actually haven't set up for Acro yet. They work a little differently now. I'm not going to talk about those at length because there is actually documentation for those. So if you were to come up here and you see we have this little file, which is open the ARK dev kit documentation site, click that. I believe it is under systems and tools. Yeah. So we have a systems and tools and then ground conform. All the death ragdoll stuff, wow, that is bright, is going to be in this documentation. So I'm not going to talk about that because I don't remember how to do all of it. I have to go through the guide too to remember. So we're going to skip over that and pass lighting and go to primal dino character. So this is the bulk of the blueprint where we're going to be setting up a lot of different changes. I'm trying to make a female dino bigger than male dino. You know how to do that. Scaling based on gender can possibly get a little messy just because of how meshes work. Truth be told, I don't really mess with scaling between gender dimorphism. So I probably wouldn't be the best person to ask for that. But I do know some modders that have done that. It is something you can do. I just don't think I can confidently give you an answer on how to do it without possibly breaking something else. But it is something you can do. And it might be something you can find just by searching like Unreal Engine 5 stuff instead of ARK specific tutorials. Okay, so let's carry on. So primal dino character, mount character socket name, mounted dino socket. So if Acro is going to ride your shoulder, that would be the socket that would go into. Let's see, we have a bunch of different stuff. Used BP killed something event. If you wanted Acro to, or your character to do a specific thing when it killed something, you would use that graph. It's a lot of just saying like yes, no. It's a lot of checkboxes on whether you want this to do something or whether you don't. Keep inventory for waking tame. We have that on. What that means is waking tame is how the dev kit refers to passive taming. So if you wanted to, let's say you had stuff in this character's inventory and it wasn't actually torpored, it would keep that stuff in its inventory if it were to become torpored again. That's how settings like that work. Skip. Again, unless these are things you want to specifically use for your character, most of these you can skip. Use BP can cryo, while prevent teleporting, BP became new baby, use PP can land. We can ignore a lot of these. Another thing is, if you see like use BP, so name here, what that means is all these graphs, that's what those are. It's kind of an already established graph that you would want to reference. So if I said, for example, use BP can land, maybe this is a flyer and I want it to be able to actually land and stop flying, right? I would check that box. And what that means is if I use that graph, the character is actually going to call it, right? It's going to reference it. So that's what the use BP ones do, is they kind of just enable a graph over in this side to actually be used. Did I just exit a tab? I hope not. Let's see, keep going. Rider, first person view camera offset. That should kind of be self-explanatory. When you are in first person riding the character, this is kind of where the camera location is going to be. So by default, if I had all of this at 0, 0, 0, it's going to be where the rider socket is on the character. So if I were to, let me save everything. Play. I'm going to spawn in an acro, and I'm going to ride him. This is me in first person view. You see I am off to the side where his saddle would seat you, and this is where that is, right? So if I were to change the setting, he's very loud. Let's say I did 1000 instead of 100. You'll see now I am way higher up, right? And that's controlling the vertical element of the character print, or the first person view. So I'm actually going to move this graph up to my top screen so you can see it in real time. So I'm going to change it back to 100 now. You see it went back down there. We have 97, that's the off-center seat. So if I change that to 300, see now we're on the other side of acro. I'm gonna put that back at 97. So that's how settings like that are controlled. And that's for first person view. There is also a camera setting, which I don't think we've gotten to yet, that controls the third person view. And I'll talk to that when I get to it. So let me bring this back down. So that was our first person view. Is there such a way to BP to make a dino a shoulder pet? Yeah. That's, I think, just a few checkboxes that you say, like, can ride player, so on and so forth. I wasn't able to attend the first. Will it be reposted somewhere? Yes, it is on CurseForge's YouTube channel. You can watch the full stream there. So, continuing on, we're going to go through the settings that I've changed here, because in most cases, this is probably a setting that you would want for your character. Allow riding. That should be very self-explanatory. It's whether a player is able to actually ride and control a character or not. We have that checked because you want to be able to ride acro. Can be tamed. It is a checkbox. Is female. Checkbox. Allow carry flyer dinos. Checkbox. Rider jump toggles flight. If you wanted a flyer, you would check that. So when you hit spacebar, you start flying. Things like that. Let's see. Can mount on humans. There's the one that you were asking for, mob events. So if you want it to be able to ride a player, you would check that box. Can open locked doors. Things like that. Let's see. Melee swing damage blocked by structures. Excuse me. So what that means is, if I had a wood wall and acro was outside the wood wall, but his head was clipping in, melee swing damage, that would stop him from being able to hit me even if his head was technically on me, right? Because the wall is in the way. And the determining factor for this is the capsule component. So even though you visually see acro's head is clipping through the wall, the capsule component is behind that wall. It does not have a way to reach the player. So in this case, it is being blocked by a structure. That is what that node does. Allow targeting corpses. That's checked. So acro is a carnivore. If it sees a dinosaur corpse, it will treat it as a target and go to eat it. Can be ordered is a checkbox. So if you wanted to tell it to follow me or to attack that target, that's what that enables. Let's see. Is carnivore. It's a checkbox. Do you want it to be an herbivore or do you want it to be a carnivore? This setting specifically, oddly enough, doesn't control the food you give it. It actually controls damage adjusters and things like that. So, for example, I believe any creature that isn't a carnivore in the game is generally considered an herbivore. And what that means, if they're an herbivore, is they take extra damage from carnivores. So that's one example of where this checkbox would be important. Allow riding in water should be self-explanatory. Uses gender. Do you want it to be, like a robot and it doesn't have a gender where it's not applicable? Or do you want it to have male, female possibilities when it's bred, right? That's what that does. Tamed wander harvest, blah, blah, blah. Don't wander is a checkbox. Do step damage. So whenever a footstep animation notify happens, whether it should do a radius of damage or not. And, I'm going through this. This might be boring to some folks, but I promise you it pulls through at the end. This is the big involved part with how you're actually going to set up the character. Like, the animations and stuff are all pretty, but this is what determines, the character actually functioning in an environment, right? So it may be a bit of a slog, but it is important to know what things do what, because otherwise you're just going to get a bunch of crashes, and that's no fun. So it's good to know what most of these do. Let's see. Fly or prevent ride or auto fly. Don't have to worry about that. Include carry weight of based pawns, so on and so forth. Can have baby. Obviously, you want to be able to breed the acro, so we have that checked. Let's see. Had an idea for a creature that gives an overshy buff. Okay. I'll say these streams are going to focus specifically on how to develop mod stuff. So if anyone has any questions about ARK Edition specifically, or ideas for mods, unfortunately I can't really humor you with those because this is supposed to be an educational stream. If anybody has any questions in regards to how to develop a certain thing, or maybe something in regards to blueprints, please feel free to ask. No problem, you help. I'm just putting it out there so it doesn't become a when is acro gonna be released stuff, but that's totally fine. You're okay. Mob events doing great. Sorry to bother you sometimes. No, that's totally fine, Mob. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. Will you show us how to implement the baby creatures? Yeah, I'll show you that as well. That'll be as I walk through this. So can a baby checked? Can unclaim tame? So if you wanted to unclaim it for whatever reason and give it to another person, that's what this unclaim tame thing here is. Let's see. Override wants to run. That's checked by default. I don't think I ever messed with it. Add passenger seat multi-use entries, blah, blah, blah. Checked. Prevent waking tame feeding. Checked. So this is a specific thing for acro specifically. What prevent waking tame feeding means is it is a passive tame, but there's certain times when you are and you aren't able to passive feed it. In Acro's case, his passive taming is when he does his adrenaline roar and you have to put narcotics in his mouth. Technically, functionally, how that's working in the game is that is a passive tame that's occurring, and it's only letting you do it at a specific time. Another example would be Tuso Toothus, when it has to be holding something for you to be able to feed it. That's another case when this graph or this function becomes important. And you can actually change these functions in real time here in the graph. So as an example, I believe it's under this here. Yeah. So we have onrep as roaring. So this is looking for when the acro is actually doing its adrenaline roar, and prevent waking tame feeding. And it's just checking it. If it's not roaring, you can't. And if it is in the roaring state, you can. And that's all that's doing. Coming back to that. Ooh, I gotta scroll. Let's see, where was I? This doesn't look like stuff I talked about already. No, it wasn't. Swim offsets. There we go. Okay. Scale extra running speed modifier. I don't think I have Acro set up to use that anymore, so I'm gonna ignore it. But that's if you want like a sort of charge build up to it. It's what Serato does, where he starts off at like a specific running speed and then he gradually builds. That's what the scale extra running speed modifier is. Let's see, flyer prioritize ally mount to carry. That's default. Blah blah. Route location swim offset. So that's kind of a weird one. So, sorry, I gotta just stretch. I can get pretty stiff sitting in a seat all day. This is, I think it'd probably be easier to just kind of show it. So let me compile. Basically, your character has a root bone, right? This is like the core origin point of the character. It's where the capsule component is red, generally. And what root location swim offset is doing is when your character is swimming, which now Acro is in a swimming state, it controls where the actual mesh is in the water, right? So it's only a visual thing. It's not specifically in regards to the capsule. It's the mesh. So if I were to change this 400 to 0, and then you can see he can, when I hold spacebar, he can go a little higher, right? And so in this case, I'm going to change that back to 400. I actually don't know if that's changing anything in Acro's case. I might have that disabled. Let's see if I change that to 5,000, what happens. Okay. Yeah, I just don't think that's being used right now. So there's probably another checkbox somewhere that I have using that. But it becomes very important for things like, let's say, Dinosuchus or stuff that you have swimming. Oh, why did you go on shield stance? Oh, because I tapped C. So that's where stuff like that would come in handy, which, you know, there wasn't really a demonstration for it because the setting wasn't being used, but that's okay. Scroll past, play animation below health, low health exit sounds, so on and so forth. Low health dino settings. The only thing off the top of my head that I know uses this is Doedicurus. So when you almost kill it, it rolls into that ball, and then it becomes like de-aggroed by creatures. That's kind of this stuff here. So if you want like a specific action to occur based on health, you would do that there. Let's see. Allow painting color regions, color set intensity multipliers, melee attack stamina cost, settings that, you know, I don't need to change for Acro, so I can leave it at default. Tamed inventory component template. So I'm going to open that so that is another graph that's being referenced. I believe you can mostly use this by default. I think, yeah, those are the only things that I changed. All this is when the creature is tamed, it controls how its inventory works. So it's, let's say, the number of actual items you can have in the inventory UI, the max weight of said items, so on and so forth. You see in that graph I just opened, there's only 2 settings I changed. Otherwise, the parent class is just default Dino tamed inventory component. And I changed the inventory weight and the max inventory items. So that's kind of just something you can leave at default. But it is something that all dinos need to have to, if you want to be able to access their inventory and do different things with that. So let's say things like the beaver or the Argentavis, where they have the craft table saddles. That's kind of where that's determined. Dino inventory. Or actually, I think that might be determined in the saddle. I take that back. And I'm going to step away just for a second because I need to use the bathroom. So I will be back in like 2 minutes. I'll be quick, and then we will talk about the next few settings here. So I'll be right back. Okay. Let's see. How are animations done and implemented? Does the dev kit have some, or do you have to buy or make some to add to creatures? If you're making like a variant of Rex or something, you can use animations that already exist in the dev kit for Rex, right? Otherwise, animations were more kind of talked about in the first stream, so I'd recommend checking that one out. Yeah, I didn't touch on everything, so maybe that can be another stream in the future. That's like missed parts or more, I don't know, an advanced session. Could I move the followers notification? Yeah, I can do that. I think it's just set to the middle of the stream by default. Let's see, where were we? Death inventory templates. Okay, so all this is when the character dies and you harvest it, it's what you get from it, right? So in Acro's case, he uses a Dino drop inventory component carnivore huge acro, which I don't know if it's using any custom settings. Or no, you know what? It is because it has his little adrenal glands. That's a drop that he has. Yeah. Yeah, apex drop. So that would be what things like that are for. The Dino drop inventory component. That's just stuff it gives to the player when it dies. Let's see, required tame affinity, required affinity tame per base level. So this is when you're taming the creature. I can't give you the exact specifics on how the numbers work because I don't completely understand them myself. But basically, you have, let's say, you have kibble, you have mutton, and you have raw meat, right? There are 3 different tiers of food. You have the one really good tier, like the preferred tier, you have the middle tier, and then you have like the lacking tier. So let's say kibble has a affinity value of 500 tied to it, right? And then mutton has maybe 200, and then raw meat is just 50. So what this required tame affinity is it's determining how much of that, how much food it needs for that amount to be satisfied. So again, if I said kibble's 500, so we would need, 500 times, 8 in this case? 8 or 7. We would want to pass that number, right? Sorry, I'm not great at math. I have lapses in math. But that's just like kind of the bar that we want to fill for the taming progress. That's what this required tame affinity is. And then the per base level is every extra level it is above level 1, it gets an extra amount of this amount. So at level 1, Acro's tame affinity is 3,750. And if it was a level 10 acro, it would have 150 times 10, so 1,500 on top of this amount, right? And that's how that works. Scrolling down, tame effectiveness by affinity, I have it 0, just because his taming is unique. Dino settings class. This is very important. So Dino settings determines the food, its food preferences, as well as damage adjusters. So I'm going to click that, open it up. So at the very top, you're going to see a new thing that's ASA specifically. This is the footprint decals. So when a creature actually walks, you see like a footprint impression. That's determined here, but I'm not going to touch on it. I'm going to scroll down. And Acro's a little unique because of his narcotic taming. So you'll see here, by default, he actually only has 2 foods in this, and that's narcotics and jelly venom. And what these are doing is determining, basically, if you have the food listed here and you have like food effectiveness multiplier, if you have that 1 or higher, it adjusts how much its food fills when it eats that. We have health effectiveness multiplier, how much it wants to be healed or not healed. So like we have jelly venom right here, and that's -1, because normally when things eat jelly venom, they lose health. But in this case, for acro, when we feed it to them, we don't want it to lose health. So that's why we have that at -1. Affinity effectiveness multiplier, affinity override, we have those set to 1 because we don't want them to actually give affinity in acro's case. Normally for a creature, their dino settings, you'll see like all the types of berries listed here. You'll see kibble, you'll see raw meat, you'll see prime meat, things like that. Is there any other way to handle simple collision for characters other than the capsule? Yeah, I mean that would be the physics asset that's tied to the mesh itself. The capsule generally isn't considered for like the mesh physics. That would be the mesh itself. You would create a physics asset. Carrying on through, we have things like extra food effectiveness multipliers. So if there's maybe a food type that's not set up in this by default, you can add that here. Like maybe if you wanted it to prefer chitin or something as a food, right? You can put that there. And then coming down, damage type adjusters. So this is whenever the character receives this type of damage, it treats that as whether it should get multiplied or reduced. So for example, acro here, damage type explosion. So anything that is explosion damage type or a child of explosion, it will take neutral damage to it, 1.0. Doesn't take any more, doesn't take any less. We have damage type instant hurt dinos. So that's a 2.2 multiplier. So acro is going to take 2.2 times the damage from those sources. We have explosion demolition, which is a specific type of explosion, and that's 1.5. Projectile with impact piercing, I believe that's like crossbows and bows and arrows. It's 1.4 with projectile impact, so on and so forth. You get the idea. This kind of determines the damage it would take. We have dino food type name. We have carnivore set up here because acro's a carnivore. That's the food preference he's going to default to. That's all the stuff we put in dino settings. Carry on down, we have allow riding max distance. So what this means is this is the distance you are from the character with the HUD element visible that determines whether you can ride it or not. Targeting team name override. This is very important. I'm not sure if there's documentation for this. If anyone in Wildcard is in the stream, documentation for this might actually be kind of nice. But this just determines the like AI targeting class that it falls into when it's in the wild. So you see we have carnivores high. So that's in the same tier as like Rexes and things. So what that means is if you have an acro and a Rex together, they're not going to be able to damage each other, and they're not going to be interested in fighting each other. However, they will go for the same targets. They will go for anything that is below this tier of class. So maybe carnivores medium, carnivores small. They'll go for herbivores. That falls under this class. Things like that. That's kind of how that works. I don't know the names of all the different tiers, which is why I'd say maybe some documentation would be helpful. Scrolling down, we have Dino name tag. This was the other version of the custom tag that I mentioned. We just have it as acro. Step damage settings. I'm not really going to go too much through them, but this kind of just determines how you want step damage to work, the type of damage you want it to do, how frequently you want it to trigger, the radius of the damage, things like that. They're all pretty explanatory. They're self-explanatory. Step damage, damage radius, damage amount, damage interval. So we're going to skip through that. We're going to keep going. Waking tame food affinity multiplier. I have one. That's specific to acro. Let's see, charge bump damage. If you wanted to do a charging function. Going to carry on. Scale extra running speed modifier. That's for acro to do a slight buildup. Step damage foliage only. So that means acro doesn't actually hurt creatures when he's walking. He only damages like stone and trees and bushes. Use BP do attack. That's a specific thing for acro. Baby cuddled montage. Which that's the level up animation is what that is. Baby cuddled montage. Baby imprinting quality total maturation time. It's the amount of time it takes for it to go from hatching out of the egg to being a full adult. Waking tame max distance. So on and so forth. We're going to keep going. Wild running rotation rate modifier. Tamed running rotation rate modifier. When acro is running, how quickly it's able to rotate to face the direction it wants to face. Keep affinity on damage received waking tame. That means if you were to shoot it while you're taming it, it's not going to lose taming affinity. Use PP fed waking tame event. That triggers whenever you feed a passive tame. Let's see. Waking tame distance socket name. That's that. Waking tame consume. All waking tame stuff. Clone base element cost. Clone element cost per level. This is cloning element stuff. Don't really mess with it. Swim sound. The sound you want to play when it's swimming. Kind of just settings. You know, you kind of go through. You tick them. You activate them. Net update frequency. That's just for sync purposes. I'll set that back down to 7. I don't know why it was at 12. I'm gonna keep scrolling. A bunch of mesh settings. AI. Okay. This is where attacks are handled. So it's gonna be a little involved. I'm going to actually remove these animations because I haven't redone those yet. So, the AI tab is where you do attack infos for the character. So in Acro's case, I'm not going to talk about all of his attacks, obviously, because I don't want to get too complicated. But we're just going to go, so we have attack animations, attack animation weights, so on and so forth. We're going to ignore those. What we want to deal with is attack infos. And this is an array that we add elements to. So if I open that, you see Acro has a lot here. He has 8. He has 8 different attacking functions, right? The order that you put these in is important. How it goes generally, index 0 is going to be your left click for the creature. Index 1 is going to be the right click. And index 2 is going to be the C key on the keyboard. Past 2, if they have native controls they call to, I don't know what they are. Typically, for me, the creatures I develop, when I go past 2, I have to start having them reference specific keyboard functions, or they're just alternates of other attacks. So I'm going to talk about just the standard byte for now. And you see when I expanded that, it opened a pretty big window. So index 0, the left click, is Acro's byte. Now, I'm going to walk through most of these settings one by one. Attack name. This does nothing other than just reference for yourself. This is the byte. Attack weight. This determines the likeliness it's going to pick this attack over other attacks. Generally, you just want it at 1. If you don't want the creature to use the attack at all, unless it's specifically something you as the player wants to do, or it's something you want to trigger through a different event, you can set it to 0. If you had, let's say, 2 different bytes, you could set each one to 0.5, and that means there's a 50% chance for each one of them to play. If you set most of these to 1, what it's going to do is it's going to do the attack as soon as it's able to. So if I had the bite and then let's say the stomp, it's going to do the stomp as soon as it can. And then if it's on a cooldown, it's going to just do the bite until the stomp is off cooldown, in which it'll immediately trigger it again. Attack range. This is the range in, I believe it's centimeters or it's meters, in which the attack actually activates. So between the target and the capsule component, the root of the character, this range determines when the attack actually starts to be activated. Am I under ASE? Oh, I am. Whoops. My bad. Thank you. I thought I was under ASA. ARK Survival Ascended. Okay. Range, minimum attack range and activate attack range. Those are just more specific settings for attack range. What minimum attack range means is it's the it's basically the point it works in conjunction with activate attack range. It's a specific range within that full range where it would actually do the attack. We don't have to worry about that in this case. And then attack interval, it's set to 0.2. That's 1 would be a full second. So the acro is able to do this attack every 0.2 milliseconds, basically. So going down through these, high quality attack. What that does is that enables or disables whether the attack can harvest from a corpse. So if I were to check this, Acro's Bite could not harvest meat or anything from a corpse. Skip Untamed, that means wild stuff can't do this. Skip Tamed, that means tamed stuff can't do this function. Only on wild dinos. Prevent when encumbered. If the creature's overweight, it can't do the attack. Riding, only allow on ground. I just had an eyelash get in my mouth. What that means, if the character is in a flying or falling state, it is not able to perform this attack. Riding only allow while flying. It's the opposite. If it's in a flying movement state, is able to perform the attack. Only use with players or riders. I believe what that means is it won't try to do the attack unless it's specifically a human character. Prevent when swimming, self-explanatory. Prevent with insufficient stamina, self-explanatory. If you don't have the stamina to perform the attack, it just won't do it. Skip on flyers and skip AI, self-explanatory. It's whether you want it to just be completely ignored or not. Prevent on female, prevent on male. If you wanted certain creatures to do certain attacks, you can check those or uncheck those. Prevent when dino carrying. If it's something like a flyer that's able to pick stuff up, it determines whether it can do the attack while it's actually holding something. Use blueprint can rider attack. So that is a more specific graph, which I can actually pull up in the middle here. So what that graph is doing, oh, I gotta scroll all the way down again. Let's see. Did I scroll past it? No, I didn't. Where are you? There we go. What this is doing is when I hit left click, it is going to go through this graph and it is going to determine based on a bunch of different settings and variables that I set up whether it will be able to actually perform the function. So in this case, I have things for acro like, is it roaring? Is it tanking? Is it in the adrenaline state? If things like that are true or false, it will tell the character, no, you can't do this. It will return false, and the function will not do anything. Even if you are spamming left click, if one of those settings is telling it you can't do it during the state, it will prevent it from happening. Now, this one specifically is can rider attack. So what this is doing is specifically for the player's input. So if you are riding an acro and controlling it, that's the graph that's used. There's a similar one down here that's used blueprint can attack, and that's determined by the actual AI. So similarly, you can have, if you have a wild acro, maybe you don't want it to be able to do an attack during a certain state, like a very specific state that isn't already determined here. That's where you would set that up. Attack stops movement. Attack stops movement while falling. I don't remember if those actually work. I think there is a weird sort of bug with those. But I think for the most part, like if you're controlling the character, these work. Location-based attack, drop carried character, cancel and drop, force update and range, blah, blah, blah. Use blueprint can attack, use blueprint adjust output damage. So what this does, when the attack happens, this is checking if it should alter certain settings of the attack, like maybe the actual damage type, the amount of damage being done. For example, Archelon does extra damage to jellyfish. This is checked for Archelon, and what it's doing is it's checking if the actor or pawn that's hit during the attack is a jellyfish, and if it is, it will increase the damage dealt in a similar graph. Disable running when attacking, self-explanatory, prevent with rider, self-explanatory, attack stops rotation, so on and so forth. I said this in the first stream. A lot of these settings are things that you kind of have to experiment with. You can leave most of them by default with whatever they are. And you can mess with some to see if there's something you want to use on a creature or if something you don't really need. Going down, attack with jump chance, we have 0. Attack selection expiration time. This you typically want about as long as the animation or longer. This determines like when the melee hit actually occurs, if it is red or if it's ignored, things like that. Attack rotation range degrees, that determines in like a cone in front of the character whether it's able to actually perform the attack or not, or whether it's going to try to just keep navigating to the target to actually perform the attack. Rotation ground speed multiplier, rotation rate controls like the character actually turning to its destination when it tries to perform the attack. Melee swing sockets. So the melee swing socket is when a melee hit occurs, where it's occurring. So if I was doing a bite attack, I would want to have a melee socket in its face. And I would just plug in that name here. So we see melee socket, which is Acro's default bite socket that I have in its mouth. We also have melee root socket. And what that means is I have another socket on Acro that actually sits slightly above his root bone. So if maybe there's something really tiny at Acro's feet when he bites, it also triggers there, so it can hit the stuff at his feet. Range socket, it's not a ranged attack, we can ignore that. Melee damage amount, this is the absolute bare bones, not a melee multiplier involves damage amount that's being dealt. If Acro had 100% melee, just the flat base value, it would do 50 damage with its bite, ignoring all other damage adjusters, things like if it's an herbivore, stuff like that. Melee damage impulse is the knockback of the attack. This, you'll see in a lot of characters, this is usually a really huge number. I don't really know how that number's factored in. So what I do personally is I kind of just look at other character blueprints and see like the general range they're going. Like, let's say in Acro's case, like I would want it to be similar to a Rex, right? So I would probably do a number that's close to Rex's damage impulse for his bite. Things like that. Swing radius, that's the actual range of the bite. Damage type, it's the actual damage that's being dealt. Which there's a lot of different default ones that you you can use. Like, you don't really need to set up your own unless it's doing like a very specific function. Attack offset. I see this changed in some character blueprints. I don't know what it does. I'm going to be honest. I'm not totally sure what it does. I think it has something to do with maybe the AI range, like when the attack is triggered. But I don't know. If somebody at Wildcard could fill me in on that, that'd be cool. Because I usually just leave it at 0 and it doesn't really mess with anything. So, stamina cost. Every time the attack is triggered, how much stamina is going to be used. Rider attack interval. So that is different from the attack interval up here. So the attack interval that's a 0.2 here is specifically for the unridden, uncontrolled acro. So whether it's a wild or a tamed one that's not being ridden, it uses that. For a player specifically, it's using this setting here, which I have at 1.1. And the reason I have it delayed is specifically for some blueprint stuff that I won't get too into. Dot product check minimum and maximum. You can leave these at 0. These have to do specifically with specific ranges around the root. I wouldn't worry about those. Attack animations. And you'll see acro has 8. You do not have to have this many. This is because I like to have a nice uniqueness to certain movements. All you do, you set up here, you put your byte and an index. You can just add it with this little plus here to add an element to the array. You have your attack animation and then animation weight. So you would put just a 1 here. Let's say you had 2 attacks and you wanted each one to have a random chance of playing. You would add 2 weights and you would put 0.5 and 0.5. And all that would do is a 50% chance for each one to trigger. The reason I have so many here for acro is because I'm using his blueprint can attack and I'm checking specific scenarios to determine which one should be going. So in acro's case, I actually have these 4 all have a chance to play when the acro is not moving, and when the acro is moving, these ones disable and these ones all get a 0.25 chance to play, because those are the ones that are specifically for acro when he's walking, so that his feet don't do any weird sliding or anything like that. Scrolling past all those, attack animations, time from end to consider finished. I never use that. We don't need to worry about it. Projectile class, if it's like a spinning attack or a ranged attack, you would want to set up the projectile here. Attack state type class, unless, again, you're doing a projectile or something, you can leave that at Dino attack state melee. Running speed modifier, we have run. Simming attack run speed modifier, we have it run. Attack target time 0 default. Don't really want to mess with any of these, right? And that is an attack. So I will demonstrate with acro quickly. With all of those settings in place, if I were to ride acro and I start left clicking, he will do his attack. And you can see there's a few different animations. He's a noisy guy. I gotta turn down his idle sounds. And then if he starts walking, he does the other ones, which look almost the same, but no feet sliding. And that is the left click. That's the first attack info. So I'm gonna just talk about that first one. I'm not gonna talk about all these other ones because there's way too many. But if you did want other attacks, for example, acro's right click is his stomp, which I guess I'll load back in. So that would be index 1. And if I hit right click, you'll see he does his stomp. That is a very pretty acro. Wow, I like those colors a lot. So that's the right click, right? Wow, I really like the colors on the acro. That's super pretty. Okay. let's see. Okay, now we have a bunch of different animations here. Enter flight, exit flight, sleep, consume food, wake and consume food, blah, blah, blah. These are just specific montages we want for specific events. Wild, unsleep. This is if the acro was torpid and it woke up without being tamed, it would play this animation. Tamed, unsleep. It's if you wanted a unique animation for how it wakes up when it is tamed. Fall asleep. This is the torpor in animation. Wake and consume food. This is just its eat animation when it's awake. Sleep, consume food. When it's torpid and it's asleep, this is the eat animation for that. Enter flight if you wanted it to do an animation going into flying state. Things like that. That's all handled here. I'm going to ignore that. We're going to keep going. We have a few other animation overrides here. We have rider animation override. So I have a specific one for acro when the player is riding. Otherwise, you can leave those at default. It's just going to default to something. Color sets. Okay, let me talk a little bit about those. So color sets are how the random colors are generated. So use colorization, I guess in this case, is not on by default. So I have that checked, and we have random color sets male, random color sets female. Generally, they're both the same. It's just the pool of colors they're pulling from. And how these work, I'm going to collapse all of these, is we have our color regions here. This is the blueprint for color sets, by the way. So index 0, if you remember from the first stream, that would be the red color region. We open that, region name, main body, color entry names, I'm going to expand. And these are all the different colors that it can randomly pick from. So that means a wild acro or a spawned-in acro has a chance to be any one of these. I think by default, if you don't add in weights, it kind of just splits it all evenly. So how many elements are here? 31. So if you did 100 divided by 31. So that means each one of these colors has a 3.2% chance of being the color it picks, right, when it generates the character. If I wanted that to be different, let's say I wanted black index 12 to have a higher chance, then I can add some random weight elements here. And I would have to add the number of elements here, so I'd have to add 31 of these. And I would just put in the actual values myself, like this one has a very high chance of being this color, this one much less chance, right? That's where I can determine that. And it's the same for all of these. So index 0 is that, index 1 is the dark markings on the acro, that has a bunch of different colors. That's how you determine those. And I believe if you want to find the names of the colors, I think you can just type in ARK Dino colors. Yeah, and you'll see a nice list here that gives you the color ID, which is the actual number. So if you do like change target dino color, and then the name of the actual color, which is what you input in the graph. So like dark violet, medium autumn, midnight blue, actual black. Those are the things that you would input here. So I'm going to leave that. Keep going. Let's see. Can you make an attack call a blueprint function instead of dealing damage? Like I want the C button to play an animation and then increase. Yeah, so that would be a buff. So I don't know if I'll be able to get to that today, unfortunately, but that's something I can talk about in another stream. It might be better to do that. Okay. Is there anyone from CurseForge or Overwolf here in the stream right now? Yes, no, maybe, hopefully, possibly. Or anyone from Wildcard. I think you're here, said. Maybe not anymore. Okay, well, I'll talk to them And I'll see if maybe they're interested in doing like a session 2.5, maybe this coming weekend, that just kind of talks more about this, because there's a lot to talk about with blueprints. I'm not going to get to everything today, unfortunately, but yeah, we'll see. So let's see. IK. IK is what determines the character actually, like, if it's walking up an incline, if the character actually rotates with the incline, if the feet line up with the ground. I am not going to talk about IK because I think the system is going to be changed a little bit. So this stuff is kind of not too much of a worry. If you are developing a creature, I would recommend just looking at a creature that's a similar size to yours and copying its IK settings. The only thing that you'll have to change yourself is the actual bone name references here. But IK is a big subject that I'm not going to try to fit into this stream today. That's too much to talk about. Below IK, we have eggs. Primal item consumable egg is the base class egg item to spawn. We want the specific acro egg, which we set up as its own blueprint here. Fertilized egg is another different type of blueprint. Egg laying montage is the actual animation we want to play, which Acro does not have one of those right now. And that's, again, just another blueprint. We can probably use mostly a default. I think the only settings that are changed is like the name and how the egg actually looks, the material. Yeah, so just another blueprint. You want to trial it off of something, and we're going to keep scrolling, and I believe we're actually getting almost to the end of it. Hurt decal data. Why is that custom? I'll have to copy that from something else and see. Poop item class. How the quality of poop that your creature produces. Can run. Yes, I want it to be able to run. Use health damage material overlay. Yes. Use poop animation notify. Is big dino. Things like that. Use blueprint anim notify custom event. If you want specific actions to trigger from specific animations, you would use that function, which I can... Yeah, I think what I'm going to do, since literally the stream all day today was just talking about this, is I'll talk about the actual... I'll try to see if I can do a 2.5 stream or coordinate with them for the actual graphing. Let's use BP adjust damage. This is the actual damage that Acro receives, not the damage that's being dealt. So in this case, you know, Acro has his whole adrenaline mechanic. So this graph is very important. It's determining when the adrenaline should build up, things like that. Excuse me. BP timer server minimum and maximum. This is a specific graph that's like basically every 0.25 to 0.5 seconds. It's triggering this graph, and it's checking for specific events, whether they've occurred or not. Use heavy combat music. That triggers whether it's just playing the light combat or the heavy. Use BP get HUD elements. That's specifically for Acro. That's the things like the little stomp icon and the adrenaline bar. Kill XP base. That's just the XP amount you get. Third person view camera offset. I'm surprised that's so far at the bottom. Same thing I talked about earlier with the first person view. It's just for the third person view. Footsteps max range. How far the footstep sounds actually happen, or how far you can hear them happen. Death harvesting component. Poop animation. Third person view structure placing height multiplier. That's specifically if you're building while riding the creature. A lot of these settings you don't need to worry about. Uses root motion. If you want a text that actually, like, where the animation moves the character, you would be using that. Let's see, snapshots. So snapshots are the taxidermy poses. So I don't think I have any set up for acro. Yeah. Yeah, he's not using the right ones right now. So I gotta remove those. Surprised we haven't gotten to movement yet. Can drag. Oh, and there's movement. So now we have our character movement tab. Oh, that's not the full one. Camera. Is this movement? There it is. Okay, so it is centimeters. So we have different things like character movement max walk speed. So that's 550. So that's the actual speed it covers on the ground, which with the running speed modifier multiplies that. So Acro's is 550. So 2.5 of that would be its running speed. Step height is the height of terrain or let's say structures it's able to actually walk over. Let's see, deceleration walking, a lot of settings that are just they need a bit of time to talk about, but I'm gonna just kind of glaze over them. Character movement rotation rate, that's how quickly the character actually turns when it walks. So it's at 45. That's pretty low because Acro's big. It takes longer for him to actually turn where he wants to go. They want to go. We have the capsule height stuff. And that's kind of going through the whole character blueprint. So again, there's a lot of stuff there that you can ignore a lot of it. But it takes a lot of experimentation. When I was starting out modding, what I did, and this is what I would recommend to anybody, is make your parent class Dino character BP and open a character blueprint of a dino or creature that is similar to the one you want to make, and then just cross-reference. So like, let's say in Acro's case, I can open the Rex character blueprint, and I can kind of just look at those side by side and see like, what's this setting? It's off. Rex is using it. Why is it using it? Stuff like that, right? And kind of just cross-reference and experiment and see what works and what doesn't. And then let's see. Yeah, as far as the buff. So what I'm gonna do, because there's still a lot of blueprint stuff I haven't really touched on. So I'm gonna leave this last like 25 minutes of the stream to questions in regards to blueprints. So if anyone has a specific question, to keep it simple, we'll keep it with like acro, like how does X happen, or can you talk a little more about this? If anyone has any questions like that, please now would be the time to ask, and I can try to talk about it while we wrap up the last 25 minutes or so of this stream. What after making a creature that has no reference in the game? Yeah. Are you asking like if there is a creature, if you're making something that's just not like the creature at all? I mean, that's hard. I'd say that might be a little advanced for somebody if it's like your first creature. How do you set up custom Dino entries? Okay, thank you for asking. So a Dino entry is basically not only is it the little like HUD icon you see when you're looking at the character, but it's also a reference for things like the name tag and what it's tied to. So in this case, that is another blueprint, which I have Acros here, Dino entry underscore Acrocantho. We have the Dino name tag here. It's got to match the name tag of our character, and then we have the descriptive name. And then we have Dino material, which is the actual little HUD icon. So in that case, that's Acro's little new flashy HUD icon. And all you do with that is you plug that into the mod data asset, which I'll talk about that in session 3. Is there a setting to make it aggro on specific structures, like boats? I haven't really messed with aggro on structures. I know it is because lead does it. I would say in that case, your best bet would be to actually look at lead. It's probably going to be something that's in his AI, actually. Let's see. Yeah, so that's here. So the AI blueprint, I don't know if I really talked about it earlier. I'm looking at leads right now. But this is determining a lot of factors like how often it's going to walk around, its aggro range for different things, when it's going to flee, like if it's taken too much damage, things like that. So that's where stuff like this is determined. So looking at leads, we see like die if left water. So those are settings specifically for swimmers. In leads case, if it leaves the water, it's going to die. We have water dino allow unsubmerged targets. That would be rafts in this case. Forced flee duration. So for 30 seconds, if fleeing is enabled, it will be fleeing. We have things like flee on critical health, attack destination offset, natural targeting range, things like that. Aggro notify neighbors range, so that's like if there's a lead within this range, it will also become aggro when it becomes aggro. Yeah, things like that. And as far as like the setting up to aggro specific structures, what it's calling this BP get targeting desire, and it's casting to the actual raft blueprint, and it's telling it if it is the raft blueprint, it has full aggro based on this little return value here. But again, this is actual graphing, which I think I should save for maybe a 2.5 session, because graphing is a whole different beast. So yeah, is there any other questions anyone has about blueprinting? Maybe any blueprints I didn't talk about? Things like that. I'm not going to answer any questions in regards to Edition specifically. Acro will be added to Ascended when it's done. I'm still working on it. It's not finished yet. If I put it in the game now, you'll have a broken, buggy Acro, which is no fun for anybody. I'm surprised. Are there no questions? It is an information overload. It's a lot to squeeze into 2 hours, which, you know, hopefully I can. I think they'll be okay for doing a 2.5 stream, and I can talk about the actual graphs. So I feel like that's where stuff becomes very important. If I scooch this over, this is where a lot of like specific events happen for your character. Like if you want, like we have Acro's adrenaline rush trigger there, the adrenaline glow, the roar. This is what I would say where it gets very complicated is the actual graphs when you set that stuff up. Thanks so much, Garuga. I'm trying to get started modding myself. It's helpful having this. Yeah, of course. You know, it's a lot to take in, but you know, outside of this stream, you can also look into you can Google or YouTube just normal Unreal Engine 5 tutorials, and there is a lot of crossover. So you know, obviously there's not going to be specifically like setting up a Dino character blueprint, but like a lot of these functions are very similar. And graphing kind of just works in like a if then but state. Like if this happens, then this will happen, unless so and so is happening. Stuff like that, right? Let's see. Absorbing everything I can. Mind blank for questions. They'll surface in a few hours. Thanks so much. How do you set up charge up attacks? Not charges, but when you hold a button and then release, will it do a certain action? Yeah, so that was something I was going to do on Acro. I actually stopped because it got a little funky. So charge attacks is using two different graphs. So it is BP handle controller initiated attack and BP handle on stop targeting. I don't want to get too involved in it because I'm just going to start talking about graphing, which there's no preface for this. So I would say if we do a 2.5 session, save that question for then, and I will absolutely talk about it when we talk about graphing. But to get you started, if you wanted to look at it on your own, you want controller initiated attack and handle stop targeting. If you want to see something that uses this, I would recommend looking at Karkinos in the dev kit. It uses those functions for its claw attacks, for holding stuff and dropping it and picking things up. That is what I'd recommend. Let's see, what is there anything else that I like? Ooh, that's very important. Character status component. This is a super important blueprint. If you do not have it in your character will not work. It will not even load into the game. So on the left side here, we have Dino character status BP Acrocanthosaurus. This is a custom one that I made. I would recommend making a custom one for any character you make, unless it's like a different type of, if you had just an alternate version of a Rex or something. But this blueprint controls the stats of the creature. It controls the health, the amount of stamina they have, their carry weight, all of that stuff. It's very important to have that. And that is, if I go to, I'm going to go back to Acro here. I'm just going to just close. Oh, why do I have an error? Why is that giving me an error all of a sudden? Try to create a property Dino character stats BB1 in scope, but another object. What did I do? Did I mess something up? Uh-oh. That's not good. Can I just remove that and re-add it? There we go. Weird. Very weird. Okay. Must have been referencing something that I... Anyway, so this controls all the stats. This is where it is here. Literally everything in regards to stats. It looks like a really intense graph. It's not that bad. Max stat values at level 1. That is what max stat values is. It is the amount of health, stamina, the total torpidity, oxygen, food, water, temperature, which literally nothing uses. Don't worry about it. Weight, melee damage multiplier, things like that. That is all here. Recovery rate status value. How quickly you want it to heal. How quickly you want its stamina to recover. Its torpidity. Time to recover after depletion. Time to recover after decrease. Amount max gained per level. Amount max gained per level tamed. Max gain per level up value percent. Recovery rate percent. Taming max stat multipliers. All of that is in the Dino character status component, which you need to have on this side here in your character BP, or they will not spawn. You will type in the spawn command for your creature and nothing will happen. I think what actually happens is it spawns the character at like the 000 coordinates of the world, and then it just kind of is stuck there and it breaks. Let's see. Earlier you mentioned us setting up a carnivore in the blueprints could be set so that they would only attack creatures of a certain size. Is it possible to further refine that so they could identify or attack specific creatures? Yes. So sort of what I mentioned earlier with lead attacking rafts, it would be the same system. So if you wanted to, like, let's say Acro, I wanted it to just have a grudge against Kentros for some reason, I can have it so that graph reads if the thing within range is a Kentro, it has full targeting priority, and Acro will prioritize that over anything else. I love that you also show your struggles. Yeah, that's kind of hand in hand with the dev kit. How can you change the turn radius? That would be the rotation rate. If you mean the actual speed the character rotates, that would be the rotation rate in the character blueprint. How do you set up spawn locations? That would be the mod data asset, which would be in session 3. That's something that I'll talk about in session 3. So for us beginners, for something like a Rex, you would copy the blueprint for the stats and then adjust it with slight variations, not speed, but radius of the turn. Yeah, you can either copy it directly, or you can make just your own, like, unique Dino character blueprint and open the Rex one, like, side by side, like in a separate window, and then just kind of cross-reference the settings. But you could also just make like a child of the Rex blueprint, right? Not speed, but radius of the turn. Well, the radius is determined by a combination of the speed and the rotation rate. So if you want it to have a tighter turn, you would want the rotation rate to be really high, right? Like, you can't determine the actual radius of the turn. You can only determine how quickly the capsule turns and how quickly it moves. So radius is just a combination of those. Turning in place. Turning in place is a setting you just enable in the character blueprint. I believe it has a really complicated name. Where is it? So this one, require acceleration for use controller desired rotation. That is turn in place. If you turn that off, the creature can turn in place. I don't know why the name is so complex, but that's what that is. If you turn that off, the character will turn in place. Setting up the actual turn in place animations, like the visual, would be done in the animation blueprint. Keep them coming, guys. These are good questions. I gotta turn down your idle sound. You are so noisy. How often is that triggering? Most of the base creatures have some sharp coating in them, so it's not really safe to work on them. I recommend for carnivore copy the Carno, and for herb use Galley since they have no coating in them. Is making a flyer. Acro, shut up. Is Making a flyer harder or easier than a land creature. It depends what you want the flyer to do. I'd say they are both complicated in their own ways. I think the easiest creature to make would be a swimmer. If you just made an aquatic. In my opinion, that's the easiest. If I were to overhaul an already implemented Dino, example, I wanted to add a swim and run animation for the Arch and Davis. Would it render the RG as a different entity or overhaul a creature? If you do everything correctly and you make your own character blueprint that is a child of the RG, as long as you name it something different, it will not overwrite the Argentavis. The way you set that stuff up is kind of set up so that you cannot overwrite it. Do you know if Wildcard is planning to do the same as you are doing now, but with maps or other things? I don't think I follow that question, Stevie. I'm sorry. Could you rephrase that? Maybe not BP related, but at the moment. God. How are you making so much? You have like a 10% chance to play these sounds, dude. So noisy. I just want to stick a horn on a dino, but somehow that fails. It worked for other dinos. No clue why this normal Equus wants a horn. Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly you're asking in regards to that. Sorry. Oh, I get what you mean, Stevie. Like if they're gonna do streams about how to do maps and stuff. I don't know. I mean, maybe if this is popular enough, that would be cool. But I think it's gonna depend on like how well this did, and then maybe they'll ask like maybe they'll ask like Nakatis to do like map videos or something. That'd be cool. Is it possible to remote control a dino without possession? Yeah, the Noglin does that. Yeah, it's very complicated graphing. I don't even dare touch it because it's kind of intense, but it is possible. I made an RG child and the beak grab and claw grab didn't work. I made sockets in the skeleton but didn't fix it. Do you know why it wouldn't work? I mean, I would need to see it, but assuming it's using the same animations and stuff, and you didn't change the socket names, it should be working. It sounds like maybe it's an issue with the socket naming, or maybe you don't have like a melee swing active. But yeah. 5 more minutes. Any other questions about character blueprints or just blueprinting in general? I know this is kind of a long-winded, intense session, but not as fun as like the animations and stuff, I know, but definitely important, you know, if you want to have like a character that actually walks around and functions. It's all determined by the character blueprint. Anyone have any other questions? Anything at all? some time to process this. How do you make a dino lay eggs in the wild like a wyvern or a mag? Wyverns specifically use a specific blueprint graph functions that I can talk about in maybe session 2.5. I keep saying session 2.5. I think they'll be okay with it because I'm streaming it anyway. So we'll see. If not, maybe I can just have a little unofficial session like this next Saturday. I'll just call it session 2.5. But yeah, that's kind of a specific function where basically as soon as the creature becomes active in the world, it looks for a specific like socket location to place the nest structure and the egg. That's kind of how they work. Are creatures from DLCs in the dev kit right now? Yes, but I think most of them have a bit of funkiness code-wise. They're not really touched up on by wildcard, so there's a lot of functions that probably just don't work right now. Would it be possible to BB track by scent or sound? I'm sure by sound. As far as like scent, you would probably have to make like a custom blueprint that basically like acts as a scent actor. You would need an actual object in the world for the character to track. But yeah, you could do that. I was going to ask if you are going to do the mod dev streams in between the session streams. Yeah, I've just been busy with this and then working on Acro and a few other things. So I'll try to squeeze it in when I can, but just busy with a lot of IRL stuff among all this. Could you make this a semi-regular thing where you talk about specific modding challenges? This is very informative. Yeah, I mean, if you guys like this enough, I could, I don't see why like an hour every Saturday I could do just like an info stream, like an info dump on stuff. That sounds fine by me. Lots of spaghetti code on those. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, it is 3. It's been 2 hours. So I'm gonna call it for today. I will talk to CurseForge and Wildcard if they're interested in promoting a 2.5 stream just to finish talking about graphing. If not, I'll just kind of do a little, my own unofficial thing next Saturday where I'll just talk about graphing specifically, stuff like that. And then the next official session 3, is March 2nd, I believe. Yeah. And that'll be talking about getting the actual mod uploaded and ready to be played in game and, testing any issues we might have. So, yeah, thanks everyone for tuning into the stream. I hope this was informative. Again, I know it's a big info dump, but kind of hard not to be. And yeah, this was all recorded. I'm going to send this video to CurseForge after this, and they'll have it uploaded on their YouTube channel. I don't know if you heard that. I think my dog is wanting to see me now. She knows I'm done. And yeah, we'll carry on in a 2.5 stream and then the 3 stream. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll catch you all later. So take care everyone, have a good rest of your day or night or whatever time it is for you, and bye bye.